My teammate collapsed during practice, and when I ran to help, the coach physically held me back, saying, "Let nature take its course." The sound Derek made when he hit the track wasn't normal. It wasn't the usual thud of someone tripping or losing their footing during sprints. This was different, heavier, like his body had simply shut off mid-stride and gravity took over completely. I was 3 lanes over finishing my own 400-meter interval when I saw him go down, his legs buckling at the knees, his torso folding forward, his face hitting the rubber surface with a sound that made my stomach drop. I didn't think, just pivoted and started running toward him while yelling his name. Derek was face down, not moving, one arm twisted underneath his body at an angle that looked wrong. The other runners were slowing down, turning back, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm. I was maybe 20 feet away when Coach Brennan's hand grabbed my shoulder and yanked me backward so hard I nearly lost my balance. "Let him be," Coach Brennan said, his grip tightening when I tried to pull away. His voice was calm, almost casual, like he was giving instruction about proper running form instead of watching one of his athletes lie motionless on the track. "Let nature take its course." I stared at him, my brain unable to process what he'd just said. Derek still hadn't moved. His chest wasn't rising. I could see a dark stain spreading under his face where his nose or mouth must have been bleeding. "What are you talking about? He needs help. He's not breathing." Coach Brennan's fingers dug into my shoulder hard enough to leave bruises. I said, "Let him be. Everyone back to your positions. Now." His eyes swept across the other runners who had stopped and were standing in small clusters, all of them looking between Derek's collapsed form and the coach. This is what happens when athletes push beyond their natural limits. The body knows when to quit. Intervention disrupts the natural order. Natural order? I twisted out of his grip and took a step toward Derek, but Coach Brennan moved faster than I expected for a man in his 50s, positioning himself between me and my teammate. He could be dying. "We need to call 911. "No one is calling anyone." Coach Brennan's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. Derek made his choice when he decided to push harder than his body could handle. Some athletes are built for greatness, others aren't. This is how we separate the strong from the weak. The other team members were frozen, their faces pale. I looked at Jeremy, our team captain, expecting him to say something, to do something, but Jeremy just stood there, his eyes fixed on the ground. I looked at Marcus Williams, who'd been Derek's best friend since middle school. Marcus's mouth was open like he wanted to speak, but no words came out. Everyone was paralyzed, and Derek still wasn't moving. I pulled my phone from the pocket of my shorts. "I'm calling an ambulance." Coach Brennan snatched the phone out of my hand so fast I barely saw him move. "You do that, and you're off this team, permanently. No recommendations for college scouts, no letters of reference. I'll make sure every program in the state knows you're a liability who can't follow instructions." My hands were shaking. Derek had been lying there for almost a minute now. Every second mattered. I knew that much from the CPR certification we'd all gotten at the beginning of the season. Brain damage started after 4 minutes without oxygen. We were already a quarter of the way there. "I don't care about the team. He needs help." "Then help him by respecting the process." Coach Brennan's face was completely calm, almost serene. His body is deciding right now whether he's strong enough to continue. If we interfere, we rob him of that moment of truth. We rob him of the opportunity to prove himself. I looked past Coach Brennan at Derek's still form. The dark stain under his face had grown larger. He's not moving. He's not deciding anything. He's unconscious and bleeding. 5 more minutes. Coach Brennan checked his watch. If he hasn't gotten up by then, we'll reassess. 5 minutes? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "He'll be dead in 5 minutes. Coach Brennan shrugged, and that gesture, that casual lift of his shoulders while Derek lay dying on the track, made something snap inside me. I faked left, then dove right, trying to get past him. He caught me by the arm and twisted it behind my back, forcing me to my knees. Pain shot through my shoulder and I cried out. "Anyone else want to test me?" Coach Brennan's voice was still calm, still measured. He was barely breathing hard despite restraining me. "Anyone else want to throw away their athletic future because they couldn't follow a simple instruction?" No one moved. 16 other athletes stood in a loose semicircle around us, and not one of them stepped forward. I could see the conflict in their eyes, the fear warring with concern, but fear was winning. Coach Brennan had that kind of power over the team. He'd built the Riverside High track program from nothing to state champions in 5 years. He'd gotten a dozen athletes into Division I programs. He could make or break your future with a single phone call. "Let me go," I said through gritted teeth. My shoulder felt like it might dislocate. "Please, let me help him." "You want to help him? Then trust the process." Coach Brennan released my arm, and I collapsed forward, gasping. "Get back in position, all of you. We have 20 more intervals to complete." Jeremy was the first to move, jogging back to his lane with his head down. Then Amanda, then Kevin, then the rest of them, one by one, returning to their starting positions like nothing was happening, like Derek wasn't bleeding out on the track 20 yards away. Marcus was the last to move, his face streaked with tears, but even he eventually turned away and walked back to his lane. I stayed on my knees, staring at Derek. Still no movement. His skin was getting paler. I could see it from here, the way the color was draining from his visible arm. "This is murder. You're letting him die. This is natural selection." Coach Brennan walked back toward the starting line, stepping over Derek's legs like he was just another piece of equipment left on the track. On your marks. I stood up on shaking legs and walked toward the school building. Coach Brennan's voice followed me. Where do you think you're going? To get help. You take one more step and you're done. Not just track. I'll make sure you're suspended from school. I have relationships with the administration. They trust my judgment on athletic matters. I kept walking. Behind me, I heard Coach Brennan blow his whistle. Fine. Consider yourself expelled from the team. Don't come back. Then to the others. Ready, set, go. I heard them start running. The familiar rhythm of feet hitting the track in staggered intervals. They were actually doing it. They were running sprints while Derek lay dying. I ran toward the main building, my legs burning from the workout but adrenaline pushing me faster. The athletic office was locked. The main office was closed. School had let out an hour ago and most of the staff had gone home. I found a janitor near the cafeteria and tried to explain what was happening, but my words came out jumbled and frantic. Slow down, kid, the janitor said. He was an older man, maybe 60, with kind eyes. What's going on? My teammate collapsed. Coach won't let anyone help him. He's been down for 3, maybe 4 minutes now. We need an ambulance. The janitor's expression changed immediately. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911 while walking quickly toward the track. I followed him, my heart hammering. We emerged from the building and I could see the team still running intervals. Derek was exactly where I'd left him. The janitor was already giving our location to the dispatcher, describing the situation, requesting immediate medical response. Coach Brennan saw us coming and his jaw tightened. He blew his whistle, stopping the workout. This doesn't concern you, Dale. This is a team matter. That boy needs medical attention. Dale, the janitor, pushed past Coach Brennan and knelt beside Derek. He checked for a pulse, put his ear near Derek's mouth, listening for breathing. His face went pale. Jesus Christ. How long has he been down? 4, maybe 5 minutes, I said. Dale immediately started CPR, positioning Derek on his back, tilting his head, beginning chest compressions. Anyone here certified? Amanda stepped forward. I am. Her voice was small, guilty. Get over here and help me. Dale kept up the compressions, counting under his breath. Amanda dropped to her knees beside him, and they worked together, switching off every 30 compressions, maintaining the rhythm that might keep Derek's brain alive until the ambulance arrived. Coach Brennan stood to the side, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. You're all making a mistake. You're interfering with the natural process. The natural process? Dale looked up at him, his face red from exertion. The natural process is that this kid dies because you were too arrogant to call for help. What the hell is wrong with you? I run this program according to principles that have produced champions. Weakness has no place in a championship team. Derek pushed beyond his limits, and this is the consequence. If we save him now, we're just delaying the inevitable. He'll wash out eventually. I stared at Coach Brennan, really seeing him for the first time. His face was calm, his posture relaxed. He genuinely believed what he was saying. This wasn't just negligence or panic. This was philosophy. This was intentional. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes after Dale had made the call. The paramedics took over CPR, loaded Derek onto a stretcher, hooked him up to machines I didn't understand. One of them looked at Dale and asked how long Derek had been down before CPR started. Dale glanced at me. At least 4 minutes, I said. Maybe 5. The paramedic's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. He looked at Coach Brennan. Who's in charge here? I am. Coach Brennan stepped forward. I'm the head coach. Why didn't you call for help immediately? I was assessing the situation. For 5 minutes? While a kid lay unconscious? Coach Brennan's jaw tightened. I run my program according to specific principles. Sometimes athletes push too hard. I was evaluating whether this was a temporary setback or something more serious. The paramedic stared at him for a long moment. We're taking him to Mercy General. Someone from the school needs to contact his parents. He turned to his partner. Let's move. They loaded Derek into the ambulance. Sirens already starting before the doors even closed. The sound faded as they pulled away, leaving us standing on the track in the late afternoon sun. The other team members stood in a cluster, looking shell-shocked. Coach Brennan checked his watch. We've lost enough time. Everyone back in position. We still have intervals to complete. No one moved. Jeremy was crying openly now. Marcus had his hands over his face. Amanda was shaking, her arms wrapped around herself. Kevin looked at Coach Brennan like he was seeing a stranger. I said back in position. Coach Brennan's voice hardened. Or do you all want to join our former teammate in quitting? Quitting? Jeremy's voice cracked. Derek didn't quit. He collapsed. He might die. If he dies, it's because he wasn't strong enough to be here in the first place. Natural selection isn't pretty, but it's necessary. The weak fall away. The strong survive. That's how I've built a championship program, and that's how it will continue. I pulled out my phone, the one Coach Brennan had returned to me after I'd started walking away. I opened the camera app. Say that again. I want to make sure I have it recorded. Coach Brennan's eyes narrowed. You're not recording anything. I already am. I held up the phone so he could see the record button was active. Had been active since I'd pulled it out. You just said if Derek dies, it's because he wasn't strong enough. You said natural selection. You said the weak fall away. Want to add anything else for the record? His face flushed red. Turn that off. No. My hand was steady now, all the shaking gone, replaced by cold clarity. I think people need to hear what you really believe. I think Derek's parents need to hear what you said while their son was dying on your track. Coach Brennan lunged for my phone. I stepped back, keeping it out of reach, still recording. Jeremy moved between us, his body blocking Coach Brennan's path. Don't. Get out of my way. No. Jeremy's voice was stronger now. She's right. People need to know what happened here. Coach Brennan looked around at his team, at the faces that had once looked up to him with respect and trust, and saw something different now. Fear was still there, but it was mixed with disgust, with anger, with betrayal. His control was slipping. You're all done, he said quietly. Every single one of you. I'll make sure you never compete at the college level. I'll blacklist you with every scout, every program. You think one incident erases 5 years of championship results? No one will believe you over me. They'll believe the video, I said. And they'll believe Dale, who saw everything. And they'll believe the paramedics who have to write a report about why a kid went 5 minutes without medical attention. And they'll believe the hospital when they report the extent of Derek's injuries. This isn't going away, Coach. You can't intimidate your way out of this one. His hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually hit me. But then he seemed to realize how many witnesses were standing around, how many phones were now out and pointed at him. He turned and walked toward the parking lot, his back rigid, his movements stiff with barely controlled rage. We stood there in silence until his car pulled out of the lot and disappeared down the street. Then, like someone had released a pressure valve, everyone started talking at once. Questions, accusations, disbelief, anger. Amanda was sobbing, saying she should have helped sooner. Marcus was pacing in circles, repeating, I should have done something, over and over. Jeremy sat down on the track, his head in his hands. Dale came over to me, his face grave. You did the right thing. That took guts. I didn't do anything. I just tried to help and he stopped me. You got help anyway. You didn't back down. That matters. He paused, looking at the team falling apart around us. You should probably get that video to someone safe. Upload it somewhere he can't make it disappear. I immediately emailed the video to myself, to my parents, uploaded it to a cloud drive. Then I called my mom and tried to explain what had happened. She couldn't understand through my stuttering, rushed words, but she heard enough to know something was seriously wrong. She said she was leaving work immediately and would be at the school in 15 minutes. The police arrived before my mom did. 2 officers in uniform, responding to the 911 call Dale had made. They separated us, taking statements from each person individually. When they got to me, I showed them the video. The younger officer watched it twice, his expression getting darker each time. The older officer called someone on his radio, requesting a supervisor. A detective showed up 40 minutes later. Detective Lisa Mercer, mid-40s, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She watched my video 3 times, taking notes. Then she had me walk her through everything from the moment Derek collapsed until Coach Brennan left. She asked specific questions about timing, about exact words, about who did what when. This is bad, she said finally. This is really bad. Your coach prevented medical attention for a student having a medical emergency. That's criminal negligence at minimum, possibly reckless endangerment. If your teammate dies, she didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. If Derek died, Coach Brennan might be looking at manslaughter charges. My mom arrived while I was talking to Detective Mercer. She wrapped me in a hug so tight I could barely breathe, then pulled back to examine my face like she was checking for injuries. Are you okay? What happened? I tried to explain, but the words kept getting stuck. Detective Mercer stepped in, giving my mom a professional summary that somehow made the situation sound even worse. My mom's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, horror, rage. Where is this coach now? She asked. We don't know, Detective Mercer said. We have officers heading to his home address. We'll bring him in for questioning. Questioning? He tried to let a kid die. That's not questioning territory, that's arrest territory. We're following proper procedure, ma'am, but yes, based on what I've seen and heard, I expect charges will be filed. My mom turned to me. You're done with this team. Done with track, done with any program that monster runs. Mom, I'm already off the team. He kicked me off when I went to get help. Her jaw tightened. Good. Best thing that bastard ever did for you. She looked at Detective Mercer. What happens now? We finish taking statements, collect evidence, build a case. The school will need to be notified. There will probably be an internal investigation alongside our criminal one, and we'll need to wait and see how the victim's condition develops. His name is Derek, I said. Derek Foster. He's not just the victim. Detective Mercer nodded. You're right. I apologize. How Derek's condition develops will be a major factor in what charges are filed and how aggressively they're pursued. We waited at the school for another hour while the police finished their investigation. Parents started arriving as word spread, collecting their stunned children, asking questions no one could fully answer yet. Jeremy's dad showed up and had to be physically restrained when he found out what Coach Brennan had done. Marcus's mom arrived, took one look at her son's devastated face, and started crying. Amanda's parents pulled her aside, and I could hear them asking her why she hadn't done CPR sooner. Why she'd listened to the coach instead of helping. Amanda couldn't stop apologizing. My mom drove me home in silence. When we got there, my dad was already waiting, having left work early after my mom called him. He hugged me for a long time, not saying anything, just holding on. We sat in the living room, and I told them everything again, every detail, every moment. My dad's face got redder and redder as I talked, his hands clenching and unclenching. "I want to press charges," he said when I finished. "Can we do that? Sue him? The school? Someone needs to pay for this. Let's wait and see what the police do," my mom said, though I could tell she was thinking the same thing. "And let's see how Derek is doing." We called Mercy General, but they wouldn't give us information since we weren't family. My mom tried calling Mrs. Foster, Derek's mom, but it went straight to voicemail. We tried Derek's dad with the same result. They were probably at the hospital, their phones off or forgotten, focused entirely on their son. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Derek hitting the track, saw the dark stain spreading under his face, heard Coach Brennan's calm voice saying, "Let nature take its course." I kept checking my phone for updates, but there was nothing. Just silence and darkness and the weight of knowing I should have done more, should have moved faster, should have fought harder to get past Coach Brennan. Around 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Jeremy. Group message to the whole team. "Derek is in ICU. Induced coma. Brain swelling. They don't know if he'll wake up." I stared at the message until the words blurred. Brain swelling meant brain damage. Induced coma meant critical condition. They don't know if he'll wake up meant Derek might die, or worse, might survive, but never be the same person again. The guy who'd helped me with calculus homework, who'd made everyone laugh with his terrible impressions, who'd dreamed of running track at UCLA, that Derek might be gone forever because Coach Brennan believed in natural selection. The next morning, my mom let me stay home from school. The principal had actually canceled classes anyway, announcing an emergency assembly for students and parents to address the incident. My mom and I watched the local news instead. The story was already everywhere. High school coach accused of preventing medical care for collapsed athlete. They showed footage of our school, of the track where it happened, of Coach Brennan's official team photo. They interviewed Dale, the janitor, who gave a damning account of what he'd witnessed. They tried to interview Coach Brennan, showed up at his house with cameras. He came to the door, took one look at the news crew, and slammed it in their faces. Through the closed door, you could hear him yelling about persecution and misunderstanding and how he'd built a championship program. The reporter on scene noted that Coach Brennan had refused to comment officially and that police had visited his home but had not yet filed formal charges. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from teammates, from kids at school, from people I barely knew. Everyone wanted to know what happened, wanted my side of the story, wanted the video. I ignored most of them, but I did send the video to a few people I trusted. By noon, it was all over social media. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, millions of views. Everyone was outraged. Justice for Derek started trending. People were calling for Coach Brennan to be arrested, fired, banned from coaching forever. The school board held an emergency meeting that evening. My parents and I attended, along with what looked like half the town. The high school auditorium was packed, people standing in the aisles and along the walls. Derek's parents sat in the front row, their faces hollow and exhausted. Mrs. Foster was holding a crumpled tissue, dabbing at her eyes. Mr. Foster had his arm around her, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. The school board president, a thin woman in her 60s named Dr. Patricia Chen, opened the meeting by acknowledging the tragic incident and assuring everyone that the situation was being taken seriously. She announced that Coach Brennan had been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. Several parents shouted that leave wasn't enough, that he should be fired and arrested. Dr. Chen held up her hands for quiet. "I understand the anger. I share it. But we have to follow proper procedures. We're cooperating fully with the police investigation. We've retained an independent investigator to review our athletic department policies, and we're providing counseling services for affected students." "Procedures?" Mr. Foster stood up, his voice shaking. "My son is in a coma because that man decided to let him die. You're talking about procedures while Derek is fighting for his life. That's not enough. Fire him. Now." The auditorium erupted in applause and shouts of agreement. Dr. Chen looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Foster, I cannot express how deeply sorry we are, but employment law requires that we—" "I don't care about employment law," Mr. Foster's voice cracked. "I care about my son, my 17-year-old son who might never wake up because your employee treated him like a failed experiment in social Darwinism." One of the other board members, a younger man I didn't recognize, leaned forward. "Mr. Foster, we hear you. The board will be meeting in closed session tomorrow to discuss Coach Brennan's employment status. I personally will be advocating for immediate termination." "Advocating isn't enough," Mrs. Foster said, her voice barely audible. "Promise us he'll never coach again. Promise us he'll face consequences. We can't make promises about the criminal justice system," Dr. Chen said carefully. "That's beyond our control. But within our authority, we will take the strongest possible action." The meeting continued for another 2 hours. Parents demanded accountability, policy changes, increased oversight of athletic programs. Several coaches from other sports spoke, distancing themselves from Coach Brennan's methods, insisting they would never prevent medical care. Current and former athletes came forward with stories about Coach Brennan's training philosophy, his obsession with weeding out weakness, his belief that some pain and injury was necessary to build champions. A girl named Veronica, who'd been on the team 2 years ago, stood up and described how Coach Brennan had forced her to continue running on a stress fracture until she collapsed, then berated her for being too soft to push through pain. A guy named Alex talked about Coach Brennan denying water during summer practices, saying true athletes learn to function while dehydrated. Another former athlete described being screamed at for vomiting during a workout, told that nausea was weakness leaving the body. With each testimony, the picture got clearer and worse. This wasn't one incident. This was a pattern. Coach Brennan had been hurting kids for years, and the school had either not known or not cared because he won championships. The track program brought prestige, brought college recruiters, made Riverside High look good, so everyone looked the other way when Coach Brennan's methods crossed lines. After the meeting ended, Detective Mercer approached my parents and me. She looked tired. I wanted to update you. We've formally opened a criminal investigation. The district attorney is reviewing the evidence to determine what charges to file. Your video has been extremely helpful. When will he be arrested? My mom asked. Soon. We're building the strongest possible case. We don't want any procedural mistakes that could let him walk. She paused. You should also know that we've discovered Coach Brennan has no formal medical training, no CPR certification, no first aid credentials. The school required all coaches to maintain those certifications, but he'd been submitting falsified documents for 3 years. My dad's eyes widened. The school never verified them? Apparently not. It's part of why we're looking at potential institutional liability alongside individual criminal charges. There were systemic failures here. Over the next week, more details emerged. Derek remained in a coma. His condition critical, but stable. The doctors said it was too early to know the extent of brain damage, but the longer he stayed unconscious, the worse the prognosis became. His parents maintained a vigil at the hospital, rarely leaving his side. The school set up a prayer vigil and fundraiser to help with medical costs. Coach Brennan hired a high-profile defense attorney who immediately started doing media appearances. The attorney argued that Coach Brennan had been assessing the situation, that he'd believed Derek was merely exhausted rather than in medical distress, that any delay in care was a tragic misunderstanding rather than criminal negligence. He claimed the video had been edited to make Coach Brennan look worse, which was obviously false since I'd uploaded the raw, unedited file. But the attorney's strategy became clear when he started attacking me personally. In a television interview, he suggested I had been insubordinate and disruptive, that I'd had conflicts with Coach Brennan before, that my video was revenge rather than documentation. He implied I'd made things worse by causing chaos when I should have followed proper chain of command. That interview made me furious. My mom wanted to sue him for defamation. My dad wanted to call the reporter and demand equal time to respond, but Detective Mercer advised us to stay quiet, to let the evidence speak, to not engage in a media battle that could complicate the criminal case. The school board met again and voted unanimously to terminate Coach Brennan's employment. He immediately filed a wrongful termination lawsuit, claiming he was being made a scapegoat for a tragic accident. His attorney held a press conference announcing the lawsuit and repeating the claims about misunderstanding and overreaction. But by then, more former athletes had come forward with stories of abuse and negligence. The parents of a girl who'd suffered permanent knee damage after Coach Brennan made her run through an injury filed their own lawsuit against him and the school. 2 weeks after Derek collapsed, the district attorney announced criminal charges: reckless endangerment, child endangerment, and criminally negligent assault. If convicted on all counts, Coach Brennan faced up to 10 years in prison. At his arraignment, he pled not guilty and was released on a $100,000 bail. Protesters showed up outside the courthouse carrying signs demanding justice. Derek's parents made a statement asking for privacy and prayers. Derek woke up 23 days after the collapse. The news spread through school like wildfire. He was awake, responsive, able to speak, but the relief was tempered when we learned the details. Derek had significant cognitive impairment. His short-term memory was severely affected. His speech was slow and slurred. The doctors said he would need months of rehabilitation, maybe years, and might never fully recover. I visited him in the hospital a week after he woke up. His parents had agreed to limited visits from teammates. When I walked into his room, I barely recognized him. Derek had lost at least 20 pounds. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. He smiled when he saw me, but it was a lopsided smile, his facial muscles not quite working right. "Hey," he said slowly. Each word seemed to take effort. "Thanks for, trying to help." "I should have done more," I said. "I should have fought harder to get past him. You did enough." His words were slurred but understandable. "Coach was crazy. Not your fault." We talked for a few minutes. Simple conversation that exhausted him. He couldn't remember the collapse itself or the days after. The doctors said that was probably permanent, those memories gone forever. He asked about the team, about whether we were still practicing. I had to explain that the program had been suspended for the rest of the season, that most of us had quit anyway, that nothing would ever be the same. I wanted to run at UCLA, Derek said, his eyes filling with tears. Was good enough. Had a chance. You'll run again, I said, though we both knew it was a lie. Derek would be lucky to walk without assistance, let alone compete at a collegiate level. His athletic career was over at 17, destroyed by a coach who believed letting him die was somehow acceptable. The trial began 4 months after the collapse. I was called as one of the first witnesses. Walking into that courtroom and seeing Coach Brennan sitting at the defense table, wearing a suit and tie, looking calm and composed, made my stomach turn. He stared at me as I took the stand, his expression unreadable. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Angela Torres, guided me through my testimony. I described the collapse, the sound Derek made, running toward him. I described Coach Brennan physically restraining me, his exact words about letting nature take its course, his refusal to call 911. I described the 5 minutes that elapsed before Dale arrived and started CPR. The jury listened intently, several of them taking notes. When Coach Brennan's attorney cross-examined me, he tried to poke holes in my timeline, suggesting I was confused about how much time had passed, that stress and fear had distorted my memory. But I had the video, and the video was time-stamped. We could count the seconds between Derek hitting the ground and Dale starting CPR. 5 minutes and 17 seconds. An eternity when someone needs oxygen. The attorney asked if I'd been a good athlete, if I'd followed Coach Brennan's instructions in the past. I said yes to both. He asked if I'd ever seen Coach Brennan act negligently before. I said no, but then I described his general philosophy, his constant talk about separating the strong from the weak, his belief that some athletes needed to be weeded out. The attorney tried to cut me off, but the prosecutor objected, and the judge allowed the testimony. Other witnesses followed. Jeremy testified about the team culture, the fear that kept everyone in line. Amanda described her guilt about not starting CPR sooner. Dale gave his account of arriving on scene and finding Derek without a pulse. The paramedics testified about Derek's condition when they arrived, the extent of oxygen deprivation, the likely brain damage that resulted from the delay in care. Medical experts explained that if CPR had started immediately, Derek's prognosis would have been significantly better. Every minute without oxygen increased the risk of permanent brain damage exponentially. The 5-minute delay was catastrophic. One doctor testified that, in his professional opinion, the delay directly caused the severity of Derek's current condition. Derek himself testified, though it was clearly difficult for him. He struggled to find words, to maintain his train of thought. The jury watched with obvious sympathy as this once promising athlete stammered through his testimony, describing what his life was like now, how he needed help with basic tasks, how he couldn't remember conversations from 10 minutes ago, how he'd never run competitively again. Coach Brennan's defense was exactly what his attorney had promised in opening statements. He'd believed Derek was merely exhausted, had been assessing whether rest would help, had not realized the severity of the situation. He claimed he'd been about to call for help when Dale arrived. He testified that his comments about natural selection had been taken out of context, that he'd been speaking philosophically about athletic training, not literally about letting students die. The prosecutor destroyed him on cross-examination. She played the video over and over, freezing on Coach Brennan's face as he said, "Let nature take its course," as he physically restrained me, as he threatened the team with consequences for helping. She asked him directly, "Did you believe Derek was dying?" Coach Brennan hesitated. "I believed he was experiencing extreme physical stress." "Did you believe he might die if he didn't receive medical attention?" "I didn't think it would come to that." "But you considered it a possibility?" It's always a possibility in athletics. And yet you prevented anyone from calling 911 for over 5 minutes? I was assessing the situation. By watching a student lie unconscious and bleeding on your track? Coach Brennan's attorney objected, but the damage was done. The jury had seen his face in that video, heard his words, watched him physically stop me from helping. No amount of spin could explain that away. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges. Coach Brennan's face went white. His attorney immediately filed notice of appeal. The judge scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. At sentencing, Derek's parents gave victim impact statements that left the courtroom in tears. Mrs. Foster described watching her son relearn how to speak, how to remember simple facts, how to be a teenager again. Mr. Foster described the college scholarships that would never come, the track career that was over before it began, the permanent disabilities that would affect Derek for the rest of his life. The judge sentenced Coach Brennan to 8 years in prison, the maximum allowed under state sentencing guidelines. He also ordered Coach Brennan to pay restitution for Derek's medical expenses and future care needs, an amount that would likely exceed $1 million. Coach Brennan was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, his face expressionless. The civil lawsuits followed. Derek's family sued the school district for negligence in hiring and supervising Coach Brennan, for failing to verify his certifications, for ignoring warning signs about his dangerous methods. The case settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, reportedly in the 7-figure range. Other former athletes filed their own suits, creating a cascade of legal action that eventually forced the school district to completely overhaul their athletic oversight procedures. I graduated that spring and accepted a track scholarship to a small college 3 hours away. Not UCLA, not the elite program I'd once dreamed about, but a good school with a coach who prioritized athlete safety. Before I left, I visited Derek one last time. He'd made progress in rehabilitation, but would never fully recover. He was living at home with his parents, attending community college part-time, working on regaining independence. "You're going to be great," he said, his speech still slow, but clearer than before. "Win some races for me. I'll do my best," I promised, "and I'll make sure every coach I work with knows what happened here. What can happen when someone abuses power?" Derek smiled his lopsided smile. "Good. Make sure no one else goes through this." I kept that promise. Throughout my college career, I spoke about that day, about the sound of Derek hitting the track, about Coach Brennan's words, about the 5 minutes that changed everything. I gave talks at coaching conferences, at high schools, anywhere people would listen. The video became a training tool for sports medicine programs, an example of what criminal negligence looks like, of why immediate medical response matters, of why coaches need real oversight. Coach Brennan served 6 years before being released on parole. He tried to get work as a personal trainer, but no one would hire him. He tried to write a book about his training philosophy, but no publisher would touch it. His coaching career, his reputation, his legacy, all of it destroyed by his belief that some athletes deserved to die for being weak. He'd wanted to build champions. Instead, he'd destroyed a kid's life and ruined his own. And Derek, who survived but lost so much, became the champion in the end. Not through running, but through resilience. Through fighting every day to reclaim what had been stolen from him by a man who believed natural selection belonged on a high school track. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.